This is the eLearn podcast. If you're passionate about the future of learning, you're in the right place. The expert guests on this show provide insights into the latest strategies, practices, and technologies for creating killer online learning outcomes. My name's Laddick, and I'm your host from OpenLMS. The eLearn podcast is sponsored by eLearn Magazine, your go-to resource for all things online learning. Click-by-click how-to articles, the latest in EdTech, spotlight on successful outcomes and trends in the marketplace. Subscribe today and never miss a post at elearnmagazine.com. And OpenLMS, a company leveraging open source software to deliver effective, customized, and engaging learning experiences for schools, universities, companies, and governments around the world since 2005. Learn more at openlms.net. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the eLearn podcast. My name's Laddick, as you've heard so many times at this stage over the last couple of years. But as I remind everyone, the show is not about me. It's about my guests here. I'm very happy to have James. And I'm going to, now that you've told me and we've talked about it now, I've burned your family name into my head incorrectly. But I'm going to try. It is Robliotta. Robliotta, right?
I'm just going to let you drown. Is that cool? That's a good way to start it, right? Is that a good way to build a friendship, Laddick? You tell me.
No, that's the thing. I mean, we're talking about we're talking about curiosity. I'm curious. How do you pronounce your?
I love it, bro. It is all good, man. You get this with a man with a unique name. I'm sure people give you all sorts of fun when they try to tell your name. And so it's Robliotta, like Robliotta.
See? Okay, so it's like Robliotta 7-Eleven. So we'll leave it there.
Sure, yeah. Pick your thing you want to rob a lot of, and let's get in there, y'all. Let's get in there.
Rob, where do we find you sitting in the world today?
I am in St. Paul, Minnesota. St. Paul. They woke up. It was 8 degrees today, friend. That's Fahrenheit. I don't know where everybody's joining from.
I was just going to say 8 degrees Fahrenheit is not. That's not my cup of tea, bro. Okay. No. I spent the Thanksgiving holiday in a very warm place, and I came back to what I consider a very cold city of Mexico. But man, you topped me for sure. Tell me about James. Give us, I love to give everybody, the 60 seconds or as many seconds as you like to put position yourself. Who are you and why are we here today?
Yeah, I'm gonna do a quick, tight 30-minute intro. So I'm born and raised in Long Island, New York, and find myself in Minnesota because I married a wonderful woman who's from out here. We moved here to be closer to her family and start one of our own about 4 years ago. And in between those two things, I went to school down in North Carolina, thought I wanted to be the next Jacques Cousteau. Around my junior year, realized I was putting too many jokes in my scientific papers. My teachers were like, this may not be for you. I was like, I think you're right. Was an over-involved student leader, decided to work in the college and university space, got a master's at Clemson, and ran residence halls and campus activities and things like that for a while until I was presenting at a conference that I took my students to. And somebody came up to me after my session and asked me how much I charged. And I said, you can buy me a sandwich and tell me I'm pretty. I'll do pretty much anything. And but turns out they meant something different. And so I became a professional speaker. And that's what I do now. I've been on my own for 13 years as a professional speaker. I talk a lot about creating organizations that give a crap about each other. So talk about organizational culture, do that in two ways, talk to leaders about how to be more authentic. I wrote a book called Leading Imperfectly. And then I talk a lot about the role that curiosity plays in creating community. So that's where I'm at. 2 kids under 3, send help, Laddick.
Yeah, I was going to say, man, that's wow. The last part, you just slid that under the wire there. That's not a small feat. Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for putting those out there. I need to put both of your book titles up on the screen here. My buddy Christian in the background there will probably find them for us and we'll find them on the screen here pretty quick.
Just I want to perfect. I only wrote one book. Got a second one, eventually.
Oh, I thought you said there was a second one that was a curiosity one.
My apologies. Yeah, the curiosity one's not a book yet. It's a clothing line. If you're interested, we could do that, right?
Nice.
Yeah.
I think going forward, you just need to have a website, Rob a lot of swag,
Rob a lot of swag. There you go. Yeah.
There it is. So tell me, I want to start out this conversation talking about something that we were discussing in the green room beforehand, which is the difference between credibility and reliability. And I think that resonates a lot with our audience and educators, obviously leaders writ large, but definitely, someone who's either going to be creating content for learners, or someone who's going to be delivering content for learners, someone who's assessing, learner performance, any of those roles, someone who's, designing for a large organization or an institution. First, I'm going to leave it there. What is the difference in your mind between credibility and relatability?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's such an interesting topic, is so many people lead with credibility. Right? Because we lead with credibility. And when I say credibility, I'm talking about your accolades, your awards, things like that, or your titles, your degrees, the people that the money that you've made, those kinds of things, right? The numbers, that's your credibility. And our credibility is important, my friends. Please be credible. Oftentimes we focus a lot on credibility, and sometimes forget about the importance of relatability. And relatability isn't your accolade. It's why does that matter to these people who are in front of you? It's not your title. It's what did you learn in your process of getting that title? It's not who you know. It's what do those people teach you? It's not your education or your degree. It's what are you doing with the knowledge? It's not your it's not your results. It's your process, right? Those kinds of things. And relatability is powerful because your credibility doesn't make you a great leader, doesn't make you a great educator, but the way that you tell your story about it does.
So how do I start to, oh, wait, I think I just cut you off right there. You're about to do it.
You're great.
No, how do you, the first question I want to ask is I think you're generous in saying, some of us, lean on credibility rather than relatability. Like, as someone who's going into organizations, who's working with leaders, who are, working with people around these two topics, give me a real scientific from the gut percentage of people that you run into. You're like, hey, we need to talk about this. Is it more than half of the people need to work on relatability? Is it 75%? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to guess, it's probably around 75%. But at the same time, I don't fault those folks, because leaning on credibility is safe. Right. It's the safer choice. Because it sets us up for here's where I came from. Here's what I know. Here's who I am. So therefore, ideally, you will respect me. And it's like whenever you hear a professional speaker talk, they have a really impressive introduction, and that introduction is great. But if you're a trash public speaker, 5 minutes in, I'm checking out, regardless of what you told me that you'd accomplished in your introduction. Right. And so, but the other piece I guess it's important to mention is that leaning on credibility is also important for certain individuals, because a lot of this world immediately discounts someone just because of the way they look, or what their gender expression is, or what their because of their race, or because of their beliefs, or because of their et cetera, et cetera. We write people off just by a visual cue. And so I don't blame some people for starting with credibility, because society, because of all of the isms, immediately knocks their credibility down a peg before they've even opened their mouth, right? And so I'm not faulting people for leading with credibility, but it's interesting because if we want to find connection, then there has to be some vulnerability in there. And it's hard to find vulnerability and credibility in the same sentence, which is why stories matter. But we're told that vulnerability is weakness, but if vulnerability is such a weakness, then why is it so damn hard, right? And so that idea of those 75% of folks that I think start with credibility, I had a supervisor one time that did this all the time, and it was very much like, you have to introduce me in this specific way, and then I will get up there and don't make sure my introduction isn't funny, and make sure, like it was very interesting the way that she carried herself and wanted, if there was ever a form that she needed to sign, and for whatever reason there wasn't a line for her to sign, it was, we'll take this back to the department that you got it from and have them remake the form, because I'm not just going to sign a random place on this form. There was a pomp and circumstance to the way that they carried themselves. And so it's very interesting to notice this in folks.
Sure. A lot of the people in our audience come from higher education institutions. A lot of people also come from large organizations, like large corporations as well, where pedigree, where that credibility plays perhaps even an outsized role in opportunities that you're afforded, in your ability to get a seat at the table, in whatnot. Help me or walk me through your process through coaching somebody to saying, look, here's how we move from credibility to that relatability in any, sort of in any situation, or why having that relatability muscle is something that they really need to care about.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. First off, Laddick, I don't need to tell you this, but we're all a part of a game, and you got to play the game. Right. Mm-hmm. Like you got, as much as we don't want to admit that it's a game, as much as that we want colleges and universities to be above the game, they're giant political beasts, and you got to play the game. And so we got to, you got to learn the dance steps. You got to learn the politics. You got to learn what's going on, and you recognize, what those around you value and how you need to approach them. Right. This is where emotional intelligence comes into play. That allows you to understand what each of the chess pieces does and what each of the chess pieces want. And so let's just stick that over here real quick. Instead of trying to sugarcoat some of this stuff. And when I'm talking about leading with relatability, what I'm talking about is in areas where you want to form connections in order to inspire people to open up, to innovate, to move, to try, to put themselves out there, to recognize that they are a part of a bigger thing. And so in having some of those moments of relatability, essentially what you're choosing to do is you're choosing to lead with stories, with slips, with struggles, not just with strengths and perfection, right? You're choosing to say like, hey, you are a whole person here, and we hired the whole person. You were hired not because you were the most perfect, you were hired because you were the most trusted. And we're going to demonstrate that by the way that we lead you. And when we lead with relatability, when we are around people who are relatable, we believe that we can, as opposed to trying to put these giant gaps in between folks, right? So in education, this is not true for everybody. I don't have the stats around this, but like, this is why the teachers and the administrators that we connect most with are the ones that make us feel like human beings.
Sure.
Right. These are like, man, I love the teacher that cursed in class. Right. I was like, oh, she's funny. Right? Oh, that's my guy. Right. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. The ones that told stories. Those are the ones that bring us in. They grabbed us by the heart and by the head. Right. But they recognize that there's multiple ways to get a point across. And you have to figure out what the stickiest way is for each student. Or, maybe it's not for each student. Maybe it's for each employee or each person that you manage on the team or each whatever. There's a dance in leadership, and finding that balance is important.
When does, or is there a time, or have you experienced when relatability either is inappropriate or fails? Is a challenge, like, and maybe you should avoid it, and maybe not necessarily lean on credibility, but lean on something else or go a different direction?
Yeah. I think leaders have this a fascinating mix. And in higher education specifically, I remember we used to talk a lot about the difference between leadership and management. And how managers are more task oriented, they're more goal oriented, they're more as far as like, we got to get this done, and they're tend to be a little bit more micromanagey, a little bit more control oriented. And versus on the other side of the spectrum, you got like friend style leaders who probably know a little bit too much about you, and probably a little bit too much about them, and they care more about workplace dynamics than they care about workplace performance, right? And great leaders kind of fall in the middle. Where they recognize that there has to be this balance of great workplace dynamics means great workplace performance, and vice versa. And so, to go back to your question, when is relatability too much? There is such thing as oversharing, right? I can know that you went on a date. I don't need to know the details of the date, or what happened after the date, or where you drove in from this morning. You know what I mean? Like there's some of those kinds of things. And there's some of those moments where we're also trying to find the line of being cool, and where and at what expense do we shoot ourselves in the foot when we're trying to be too cool.
Okay. So I want to take you there too, because I know that, again, a lot of our audiences, they talk about, or we have conversations around generational gaps, right? So the person at the front of the class, or the person who's leading either the organization or the department, is someone who looks like me. I'm not going to say you, because your children are younger than me, but you're working with, or you're leading, or you're attempting to educate or be a guide for people who are in a different generation. And so relatability may be cringe. You know what I mean? There's a cringe factor there sometimes. Like, do you counsel people to lean into that, or what?
Yeah, for sure. I think so. I mean, I think it's also about what are we being relatable about, right? Like, let's not avoid the elephant in the room right now, right? We're in the Taylor Swift era of our lives.
Yeah, amen to that. Let's just call it. Let's just call it. We've officially moved into Swiftie era.
Yeah, for sure. If for no other reason to get you a few more listens, let's talk about Taylor Swift for a while. That's marketing 101. You know what I mean? But the thing is that, if you are from an era yourself where Taylor Swift wasn't a thing, I don't need you to start listening to a whole bunch of Taylor Swift and then coming into the classroom with a whole bunch of T Swift puns, right? And I don't need you to rename your lectures like, all right, we're out of the woods. All right, we're here, right? You know what I mean? Like, I don't need you to get all the way into it. If it's not authentic to you, then it's clearly going to be feel ridiculous for the other person, right? Real recognizes real. That's what hip hop taught us. And so when it comes to, sorry, I'm a hip hop head.
I'm just thinking of all the professors who are like, oh, maybe I should start my lecture in the fall with, it was a cruel summer. I don't know. Anyway,
right. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Bad one.
Yeah, for sure. No, absolutely. Yeah, on the top of your test, there's a blank space. You can write your own name. Anyway, let's not go down this trail, Ledek, because neither of us will be impressed with the other by the end of it. And the one follower left will be cheering us on. But so I think it's about being authentic to yourself, because we can tell when someone's trying to force it. When someone's trying to be the cool dad, right? Or when someone's trying to be the cool whatever. Can I
just repeat that for a second? Because this is what I have found in my life, with 3 kids and different various, parts of life. Like, being yourself, that's sometimes the toughest row to hoe. You know what I mean? Like, just because we are, especially I think in the age of social media, it's just such a tough row to hoe to just figure out, what is it that, who am I, right? Like, what's my authenticity? Do you have any counsel around discovering that?
Good luck. No.
No. Here. Thanks for listening to the eLearn podcast.
All right, you'll take care. Yeah, thanks. No. Subscribe and follow. No, it's like there's some people that consider that to be the meaning of life, right? Like is to find your true center where you just find peace, right? And and so I think as far as ways to do it, there's a number of ways. I think first off, it is recognizing that you don't have to be anybody else. And when you try to find yourself being like, oh, I need to be more like this, or I need to be more like this, right? Like, where are the places where we say, well, I'm not cool enough, I'm not funny enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not hot enough, I'm not rich enough, I'm not successful enough, I'm not a good enough parent, I'm not a good enough partner, I'm not a good enough this, right? Or when we start to say things, oh, look what he's doing, I should. Look what she's doing, I should. Look what they're doing, I should. Oh, I should. Oh, I should. Oh, I should. All of those kinds of moments are us convincing ourselves that we are not enough. We're not who we should be. And in every single one of those moments, we're chasing something that is potentially inauthentic to who we are. And how do you reverse that? How do you find peace? How do you slow down? You know, that's probably where things like meditation come in.
Right.
That's where things where, recognizing how much social media is affecting you, and the role that it's playing, the other way that other people's opinions are influencing you. I'm currently, I proudly go to counseling, and there's a question that, hey, amen to that. Amen, in life, would you rather be liked or respected? And if you had to choose one, which would you choose, is a question I was kind of talking to my counselor about. And my answer to that is respected. But all of my actions point to that I want to be liked. And so, for you and whoever's listening, like, what are your actions pointing towards? And I think that's what I'm currently working on, right? Because I get the hit from the likes, I get the hit from the follows, I get from the listens, from all that kind of stuff. And, I don't put stuff out on the internet because I'm like, well, it's not good enough. Not enough people are going to whatever. It's not original enough, or I'm not smart enough, or right. Like, all those kinds of moments where we've convinced ourselves that we're not enough is, I don't know. Yeah, it's just hurting us. We're carrying too much. We deserve to live a lighter life.
I want to just thank you for that moment of vulnerability, my friend. That was beautiful. I feel like that was an incredible amount of value in the last 2 minutes there. I want to somehow segue or find a way to segue from credibility, relatability, and we've been talking a lot about vulnerability, to curiosity. So talk to me about, this was like sort of the headliner that we started this podcast with. Why is curiosity important? Let's just start there. What does it do for you? After you've gone through your credibility and after you've established relatability, and you're kind of like, what does curiosity get you?
Yeah, I think curiosity has to be a mindset for our lives. It can't just be something that we are occasionally. We have to be regularly curious. And because if we are not, if we're not, then we are apathetic. If you look up the antonym of curious in the dictionary, you get uncurious. That's right. But if you look up the antonym, of curiosity, you get apathetic.
Okay.
And in life, I don't like being around people who are apathetic about whatever it is that we're doing, whether it's the education, whether it's the goal, whether it's the parenting, whether it's the relationship, the love, like I don't want to be around people like, hey, it's fine. Right.
Yeah, whatever.
And so curiosity punches apathy in the face. And when we apply the idea of curiosity to creating stronger teams, stronger environments, stronger organizations, et cetera, curiosity creates community. Because when we ask each other better questions, when we ask each other, or just not even better questions,
when we just ask each other questions,
just more questions, right? Ask one more question, those kinds of things. we get out of the way of, or we get out of the pattern of assuming. But so many of us choose the easy road, and assuming is easier than learning, but just because it's easier doesn't mean it's right. And so when it comes to the power of curiosity in creating community, what it takes is a mindset, because we have to rewrite those patterns that we're in.
If I'm someone, who might describe myself as introverted, hey, look, I'm an engineer type. I'm a what, like someone who's, you would, or we could say mousy. I'm not sure how many different adjectives I can put there, but for you and I, being curious, we're both, I'm assuming we're both extroverted individuals. We're both out here.
I don't hide that well. I don't hide that
well.
Oh, okay. All right.
What's your counsel for people who find it, reasonably difficult to put themselves out there, talk with other people, ask questions, those kinds of things?
Yeah. I think first off, it's really important that we name that introversion and shyness are not synonyms, right?
Agreed.
Like shyness has to do with a fear of talking to people. Introverts aren't afraid. It just takes a little bit more energy for them, right? And they'd rather spend their energy deepening the relationships they already have than forming new relationships. Nothing wrong with that.
Right.
And for that reason, introverts often have stronger, deeper relationships than extroverts do. So when it comes to this idea for introverts, I think it actually should come more naturally to them to be like, you know what, I'm going to lock in here, because that's one person I got to worry about, instead of going around and talking to all the other people at this Christmas party, right? Or at this networking event, or at this whatever it is, career fair, right? It's like, I'm gonna use my energy and my resources for what I know best, which is locking in and forming a deep relationship with somebody. So I think introverts are actually better long-term networkers than extroverts for that reasons. Extroverts have more business cards, but they don't have any follow-up.
Right.
And so introverts have less business cards and more and better follow-up.
Do you have a go-to aha moment or story that you tell around a group you've worked with, or, some leader that about, discovering the power of curiosity? I'd love to hear, one of those ones where it's like, wow, I didn't know that, and either a team was created or a new solution was found, or a problem solved in some unique way.
I could share one in the opposite direction, if that's okay, to try to illustrate a point. Does that work? And actually, it's not a workplace example. It happened with my in-laws.
Okay.
And so so it came time. My wife was living in Minnesota. I was living in New York at the time when we started long distance dating. It came to that point where we're going to meet the parents. So she decides that she's going to tell her parents about me. Apparently, I'm someone who needs a little preparation. And so she starts to tell her parents about me, and they say, "Oh, and Mom and Dad, I met somebody. He's an Italian." Like, "Oh my gosh, an Italian! We love Alfredo sauce, right?"
Yeah, absolutely.
They're great Minnesotans. And so like, "Hey, he's an Italian. He's from New York." "Oh, an Italian from New York. Yeah, and he lives in Brooklyn." And then her parents stopped asking questions. It's funny. There's a rule in comedy writing called "If that's true, then what else is true." And we can think about, like, if you ever saw like Schitt's Creek or shows like that, where they take you deeper and deeper into these worlds. They apply this rule of "if that's true, then what else is true" to create the next episode, the next scene, the next sketch, whatever. And so the next beat. And so her parents apply this rule unknowingly to this conversation, and they stopped asking questions. And instead, behind closed doors, they're like, "All right, our daughter's thinking about marrying an Italian from New York who lives in Brooklyn. If that's true, what else is true? Our daughter is marrying someone who's in the mafia."
I was waiting for it. I was waiting
You're
for
waiting
you to
for
say
it, right? And so, like, okay, if that's true, then what else is true? He's probably got a nickname. And unbeknownst to Tina, my wife, unbeknownst to me, they're referring to me behind closed doors as Jimmy Biscuits. Right?
Yes.
And I love biscuits. So that's the most accurate nickname I've ever given in my life, right? But they chose to not ask any questions, any more questions. Instead, they wrote the rest of my story, right? We do this all the time, right? If that is true, is what else is true is a great rule in comedy, but it's not a great rule. It's not a great rule in building teams. It's not a great rule in building community, but we use it all the time because you learn a little piece of somebody's story and we're like, I think I got the rest. Right. And so, fortunately in due time, her parents have gotten to know me, but just like, it was just such a funny moment where they just like stopped asking questions. Right. I had a supervisor one time also who, was allergic to taking responsibility for things. And nothing was ever their fault. It was always because so-and-so didn't do their thing, so I couldn't do my thing. It was this or this and that, and so that was an opportunity that was missed by that supervisor to create an authentic moment or a relatable moment of, I missed it. And instead of leaning into things like relatability or curiosity, she stuck to her guns of like, I'm right. And this is the way it is. So those kind of moments are tough. One other example I'll share is a different supervisor who had incredible hindsight. Right. If the United States Air Force cared about hindsight, she would have gotten in. It was always interesting because we would put on an event on campus and then she would come up to us afterwards and say, oh yeah, I could have told you that was going to happen that way. Or I could have told you that would have happened that way. And like, you were in the planning meetings. Where are the moments where you're asking questions? Where are the moments where you're, where we empower individuals by asking them questions? Sometimes giving advice is lazy. Right. So instead, ask the questions to have them wrap their brains around it and create the moments and oh, shoot. And then the moment of, oh, shoot is followed by that moment of, I did it. Right. And that I did it moment is sticky. We want more of that. And so that's why inspiring critical thinking in people we work with is important. But she never did that. Instead, she inspired me to feel like I was stupid. Right. Or that it was like, that I just was, my ideas were never fully formed or fully good enough or fully whatever, that I wasn't fully enough. And, those are tough moments to come back from because I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't want to work for somebody who makes me feel stupid.
Yeah,
but in those moments, if she was more curious about the way I was approaching it or thinking it, or curious about had I thought about this or had I thought about that, now you're broadening my scope. You're teaching me about the bigger world afoot. You're teaching me about the other political partners or the other students that could get brought in or the other whatever, right? Give or take the situation. But that opportunity was missed. And instead I just kind of felt stupid.
Sure.
So it was a whole bunch. Sorry.
No, I absolutely love it, but because it feeds right into where I want to go. My question is this. So I'm sitting here listening to you right now. I'm listening to this podcast. I'm in my car or, I'm on my way to work or I'm on my way to my classroom or whatever. And the thing I struggle with is what questions to ask, or I don't want to ask the wrong question or get into an awkward situation or, or stumble over myself. Like, counsel me through that in terms of, do you have like a go-to list of questions that you would, you ask people or how do you come up with those creative questions to ask or, I'll stop there.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, there's no magical question, right? I mean, a phrase that I think we could all keep in the back of our pocket and use a little bit more is tell me more about that. Right. Okay. It's a way to shift. Even small talk conversations are immediately shifted because all of a sudden we're going a little bit deeper. Right. And it shifts it. It
sounds to me like that piece of advice. Tell me more about it is a piece of advice I got a while ago, many years ago from one of my mentors. He's like, what if you just be interested? Like honestly be interested in the person or the moment or whatever. Right. Like don't fake it, but actually care. And so when you're saying like, tell me more about that, like, no, really try to learn something new,
Yeah. Yeah. And so tell me more about that can be applied in the situation that you were talking about, because it's like, walk me through how your brain approached this situation. And I think that tone matters a lot, right? The delivery is important. And this is where we have to, I'm sure you've had folks come on here and talk about the difference between intent and impact, right? And your intent was to ask a really curious question where you were hopefully, going to learn more about the way they thought and how they approached it. And you think their brain is fascinating, but your impact was you made them feel like they did something wrong. Right. because of your
They're
tone
under a
choice.
spotlight, they're under scrutiny or something like
Yes.
that. Yeah.
And so this is the power of, it takes a little bit more time, but the power of a preface, right? And just be like, hey, I want to make sure this question comes off in the right way. Here's my intent with it. And so, I truly am curious about it. So, tell me more about how you came up with this, or tell me a little bit more about, had you considered this, and what was your thought process around including those people or choosing not to do it this way or whatnot? I think the way that you can share it, and it's also in the way that you have built your relationship with that individual. If this is the first time that you are trying to care about them, it's going to take a minute.
Right.
Right. The walls don't immediately come down because you've decided, because you listen to one bearded guy on a podcast, you're like, oh, shoot, I got to be more curious. Right. Like, there's a relationship building, there's a trust building in there. And if you care about their whole person, then they're more likely to recognize that in those moments, you're coming from a caring, beautiful place.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's important too.
What's the danger in not being curious? Like what am I risking in either my school or my workplace or whatever by, let's not say, I don't think anybody intentionally shows up to be apathetic. Maybe I'm wrong, but what are the dangers there?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest dangers is retention. When we think about why people stay for community a lot longer than they stay for compensation. And like, if this is a place where I feel seen, heard, respected, safe, appreciated, then I'm going to hang out a lot longer. If I have a boss that I know is caring about me and is clearly trying to put me in situations that are truly helpful and that are great for me and expanding my brain, and they see a lot of potential in me, I understand that they can't quite pay me blank and blank yet, but I'm in a place that cares deeply about who I am, and they also recognize that I have a family or that I have a life or a partner or whatever, those kinds of things. Or in case of students, that I probably have an off-campus job because higher education is expensive, and so this can't always be my number one.
Right.
And so those kinds of things. I think if we are not curious about folks and we are not giving them time, then we're making people feel unappreciated. We're making them feel like they're just a number. We're making people feel like that we don't truly care about them, and we're not glad they're here. And I think that's one of the biggest things. Like, if you want to go all the way deep into the risk of not being curious, if we want to bring it up a notch and maybe not as deep and societal, the risk of not being curious is that we never innovate, right? This is the way we've always done it. We're going to keep doing it. If we're not asking questions and we're not thinking about new ways to do things, then we're just, we're all on a path to be a funny joke one day, like Blockbuster. And so, there's areas like that as well.
Fantastic. James, this has been a fantastic conversation around credibility, relatability, vulnerability, and curiosity. I think you need a fifth. We need a fifth one in there. But this is a fascinating conversation. I love all of your humanness that you brought to this conversation. I absolutely adore it. And I hope that we get a chance to either work together or talk again sometime soon.
I would love it. And thank you for everything you all are doing over there. It's really incredible work you're doing at Open LMS.
Thanks, man.